Hi, my name's Tom Amos. I'm the Library and Learning Services Manager at CU Coventry. In this presentation, I'm going to cover APA7 referencing. So there are three main aims in this session. First of all, we're going to look to understand why we need to reference. Then we will move on to understanding when to include in-text citations and how to use those. And finally, how to construct a list of references at the end of your work as well. So just to give you a bit of a general introduction to what referencing means and what it is. Referencing is a vital part of your academic writing. You can't succeed really at university without doing this. And it involves acknowledging the source of any information or ideas you have used in your own work that aren't your own. So whenever you've drawn on somebody else's work, thoughts, ideas, you've used the images of others, maybe you've used some statistics from a website, some information from a book or a journal article, anything like that, you need to reference. And we do that to inform the reader of sources we've used, but also for a number of other reasons, which I'll cover in just a moment. So before we move on to that, I just want you to perhaps take a moment just to think about why do we reference? So why do you think we need to reference material we've used in our writing or in our research or assignments? Perhaps you'd like to think about that question for just a moment. If you do, pause this video and unpause it when you're ready to have a look at some of the answers. So to go over why we need to reference or why we reference, it's important to support your argument with evidence and examples. So anytime you draw on the work of others to add evidence to your assignment, you need to reference that. Referencing is also about giving credit and recognition to others for their work. So you're acknowledging that something isn't your own work. In-text citations, which we'll look at in a bit more detail in just a moment, also separate your ideas from the ideas and work of others within your assignment or within your writing. Referencing also helps to demonstrate the quality of resources you've used. So if you've used lots of really high quality research, you can reference that, and also shows your own understanding of a topic or knowledge around a subject. Because if you can draw on the work of others, analyse them and incorporate them into your own work, it does show that level of understanding. As well as that, referencing is one of the key ways you can avoid any kind of misconduct. So things like plagiarism. And plagiarism is the act of using other people's work, images, thoughts, ideas, etc., as if they are your own. So if you reference clearly, it's a really good way of avoiding plagiarism. So again, I have another question on this slide for you. So I've covered some of this perhaps already, but it'd be useful maybe just to take a moment to think about this and these questions. So if you do want to do that, again, pause this video, perhaps make some notes, and then we'll talk through the answers in a bit more detail. So we've got two questions. When should we add a reference to our work? And are there circumstances when we don't need to include a reference? So again, perhaps pause this video for a moment if you'd like to have a think about those. But now we'll go through the answers. So just to recap, you should reference whenever you use the work of anybody else or any work that's not your own, whether published or unpublished. So that might be their sort of thoughts or ideas, or it might be something you've read in a book or journal article or on a website, etc., etc. But are there circumstances when you don't need to include a reference? Well, yeah, there are two primary ones. So if something is your own work or you're reflecting on your own experience, then that's your knowledge, so you don't need to reference them. But also if something is common knowledge, you don't need to reference then either. So for example, if I was to say in my work, the world is round, I didn't discover that, but it's common knowledge. Basically everybody knows that, so you don't need to reference. So to give you a bit more detail about referencing at Coventry University, the Coventry University group uses the APA 7th edition style of referencing. And there are lots of different styles of referencing that exist. So you might hear about Harvard referencing or Oxford or Vancouver or lots of the other styles. But anytime you are referencing within your work, you should use APA7. And the style basically just tells us what details about the source we must include in our work and how it's presented. So when we're referencing in APA7, there are two main elements to this. So one is an in-text citation, and these in-text citations go within the body of your work or assignment itself. And the second sort of key part of referencing is the list of references at the end of your work. And this is a list of all of the sources you've used in your writing. So in the next bit of this recording, we'll go through what an in-text citation looks like and how to construct that, and then we'll do the same for a list of references as well. So what does an in-text citation look like? Whenever you use somebody else's work, so again, whether you're quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing, drawing on the work of others in any way, you need to include an in-text citation in your assignment or in your work to acknowledge when you've used the work of others. So this involves normally giving the author's surname or surnames if you've got multiple authors, or maybe the company name if you're using something like a website that perhaps doesn't have a specific person that's authored it. It's maybe a company instead. Year of publication, so when was the source produced, and a page number, and we've got in brackets there if there is one, because again, some sources, for example a website, won't have page numbers, whereas others will. So if you're using a book or a journal article, you will have a page number and you do need to include it. So if there isn't a page number, you can miss it out. And there are two types of in-text citations. So one is an integral citation, and this is where you've integrated your author's names and the source into your writing. And the other is a non-integral citation, and this is where you make your point and then you acknowledge the source at the end. And I'll show you examples of both of those just now. So just here, we've got an example of an integral citation. So for example, Cottrell, who is our author, 2013 is the year of publication, claims that critical thinking when reading is essential to academic success. So that bit in quotation marks, critical thinking when reading is essential to academic success, is not our work, it's from Cottrell's book. So put that in quotation marks, and then at the end of that point, we've got the page numbers as well. So whether you're quoting, paraphrasing or summarizing, putting something into your own words, you would structure this type of integral citation in exactly the same way. So you're signposting to your author or authors, then you've got your year of publication immediately after that, make your point, and then page number, if there is one, at the end of that point. If there's no page number, so for example, if you're referencing something like a website, you just miss that out. So that's an example of an integral citation. A non-integral citation would be like example 2 here. So where it says at the bottom of this slide, students typically write multiple drafts before submitting their assignment. Again, that's not my own work, it's from Cottrell again. but this time I've not integrated the author and the other details into my sentence in the same way. So I've made my point, and then at the end of that point about students writing multiple drafts, I'm going to acknowledge the source. So I've got a set of brackets there with my author or authors if there's more than one, place of publication, and the page number as well. And both types of citation are perfectly acceptable, integral and non-integral. It really just depends on the structure of your sentence, how you're writing, and so on. A good essay probably would use a mix of both integral and non-integral citations. So I have a bit of a question on this slide here for you. So again, if you'd like to perhaps pause this recording and take a moment to maybe make some notes or go through those questions, please do. But in a moment, we'll move on and have a look at the answer. So our question is, which of these is a correct APA in-text citation? So we've got example A, B, C, or D. And we'll have a look at the answer just now. So our correct answer is C. So just to give you a bit of information about why that's correct and why the others are not correct. So C is an integral citation, meaning we've integrated our authors into, or author in this case, into the sentence, so MacLeod, and then straight after that we've got our year of publication, 2013. And then we make our point, and at the end of that point, which is a quote, we've got a page number. So example A, or A is wrong, because we've got our page number after our year of publication, which we don't want. Example B is not quite right because it does the same thing. It's just put P for pages in there, but we don't want that either. And example D is wrong because the year of publication is at the end and there's no page number there either. So which of these is correct, A, B, C, or D? That's why C is correct. It's in APA7. So that's how we would do an in-text citation. So next I'm going to move on to show you how to construct a list of references. And again, a list of references goes at the end of your assignments and gives you full details of all of the sources you've used within your work. Your list of references should match your in-text citations. So if you've got a source mentioned in an in-text citation or signposted to, it should be in your list of references. Your list of references should be organised alphabetically by author. So A to Z, and it's just one long list of everything. You don't need to separate out by source type. So sometimes we get asked, do I need to separate books, journals, websites, different sources in my list of references? No, it's just one long alphabetical list. Okay, so to give you a bit more information about how entries in a list of references look, on this next slide, you can see an example of an in-text citation in the body of our work. So Cottrell claims that critical thinking when reading is essential to academic success. You can see our in-text citation there. And then we've also included that source, which is a book, in our list of references. So a book in a list of references would be formatted like this in APA7. So we have our authors first, so Cottrell and Cottrell's first initial. If there's more than one author, we would include them as well. And I'll give you a bit more guidance on that in just a moment. Then we've got the title of our book in italics, the edition of the book, if it's the second or subsequent. If a book is a first edition, we can just miss that bit out. And again, I'll give you a bit more information about that in just a moment. And then the publisher, so the publisher's Palgrave Macmillan, comes at the end of the reference as well. If you're not sure about this just yet, or you feel like you need more guidance or help, don't worry. At the end of this workshop, I will point you to our LibGuides pages. And on there, you can find lots of detailed guidance which goes through how to reference all of the different sources you might come across. So at this point, you might be wondering, where can I find all of this information? So particularly if you're referencing a book, you might be thinking, how can I find the publisher, the edition, the year of publication, and those details that I need to include in my referencing? Well, in a moment, I'm going to jump away from my PowerPoint and go over to the library's LibGuides pages. And from there, we'll have a quick look at Locate, which is the library catalogue, and just show you where you can find those details and how you can make referencing a little bit easier for yourself. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, go across to LibGuides, and we will take a look at that. As you can see, we are now looking at the library's LibGuides pages. I'm just going to go back to the home page here. And from the home page, our LibGuides homepage, you can see lots of different options on the screen here. But I'm going to go to Locate, which is the library's catalogue, and just show you how you can use that to help with your referencing. So if you found a book via the library, so maybe you've read an ebook, go on to Locate, go back to that book. So I'll just do an example search as soon as Locate loads up. So let's search for a behaviour management text. And we'll just use this top example here. So if I've used this book in my work and I want to reference it, I'm going to find it on Locate, click on the title, and from here I'm going to just scroll down and look for this Details option. And under this Details tab, I'll find things like the title and the author, but also all of the other details I need to reference this source are here as well. So I've got the publisher, and it tells me where this book was published, which I don't need. It says London, but I don't need that. But I do need this bit here, which tells me the publisher, Bloomsbury. The creation date is when this book was published. So again, I need to include that in my references. And sometimes you'll see edition here as well. And that's if the book is the second or subsequent edition. If a book's a first edition, it won't show you it on Locate. You don't need to include first editions or mention of the edition in your references if something is a first edition anyway. So if you see edition here and you see second or subsequent, include that in your reference. If it's a first edition or it doesn't say the edition, miss it out. So that's how to find a book on Locate, and then how to use Locate to help with your referencing. You can also do the same with Bibliu, which is another ebook platform that we have access to. So again, I'm just going to quickly show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to go back to our PGCE LibGuide. And from here, this time I'm going to select Bibliu rather than Locate, and just go through to the Bibliu platform. Sign myself in. Just give Bibliu just a moment to load. There we go. So once Bibliu has loaded, I'm just going to do a quick search to find a book. and then I'll show you how to use BibliU to reference as well. So I might be searching for reflective writing as an example. So I'm just going to pop that into BibliU and just let BibliU load. And once that's loaded, I can either scroll through the results here and select a relevant result, or I can pick a book from the top here. So I'm going to select the reflective journal. And to reference this book, once I've accessed it in BibliU, I'm going to click more options in the top right, get out of the way, and then click on references. So more options, references, and it will help me to reference this book in APA7, which you can see at the top there. And generally speaking, BibliU does a really good job of doing this. It's pretty accurate. Do check the reference that it generates here against the referencing guides, which I'll demonstrate in just a moment. But normally, or fairly commonly, you can copy this and get away with not editing it too much, and then including it in your list of references. So BibliU can be really helpful when it comes to referencing as well. Next, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and give you a bit more information about how to construct your list of references. Then we'll have a look at the referencing guides and finally finish off with a bit more support you can get from the library. So now I'm going to stop sharing BibliU and my browser and go back to the slides. To recap then, we've looked at where you can find this information and how you can use Locate and BibliU to help you find things like the publisher, publication date, the edition of a book, etc. But you can also use the source itself. So if you've got a book in front of you, or if you're looking at a website or journal article, whatever it might be, you can also find the details you need to include in your references. On the source itself. It's just if you're using a book, sometimes it's easier to get them from Locate or BibliU. So I have another question for you now. So I'd just like you to tell me, looking at these references, or perhaps just pause the video for a moment and have a think about which of these references is correct in APA7. So again, in a moment, I'm going to change slide and show the answer. But if you'd like to take a minute to have a think about that or make some notes, please do pause the video now. So we've got example A, B, C, or D, and you can see here that out of these, example B is a correct reference in APA7. To give you a bit more explanation, it shows the authors at the start. So we've got the author and first initials. I've got two authors, a year of publication, the title of the book in italics. There's no edition because this book is a first edition, so we've missed that out. And then at the end, we've got the publisher, so Oxford University Press. Example A is wrong because we've got our year of publication at the end, which we don't want. And we've also got a place of publication in there, so Oxford, which we don't need. Example C is wrong because they've used et al. In a list of references, which we wouldn't do. I'll give you a bit more information about that in just a moment, so don't worry if you're not quite sure about that at the minute. Also, it includes a place of publication at the end, so you can see Oxford at the end there, which we wouldn't do. And then example D is missing lots of detail, which I'm sure you can work out by looking at it. So when you're referencing different sources, I'm just going to show you an example of the format you would do that in and talk you through some common sources that you might reference. Don't worry if you don't get all of the information from these slides or you're still not quite sure. Very shortly, I'm going to direct you to our LibGuides, which have lots of really great guidance on and a lot more information that you can access. If you're referencing a book, you can see a basic format on the slide here. So we would have our authors first, then the year of publication, title in italics, edition, if it's the second or subsequent edition, and lastly the publisher. And you can see an example of that below the format at the top there. If you're referencing a website, you can see an example of how that's done at the top, or the format at the top, sorry, and an example just below that. You'll notice there's a difference between the format at the top and the example below. So you can see in the top it says author, date, title, and website name. So that website name is the same as the company name. But if there's no specific author on a page, so if you don't know who has written the page, there's no personal author, you use the company name at the start, and then you don't need to repeat that, so you miss the website name out. And you can see an example of that just below. Again, don't worry if you're not quite sure. I'll direct you to some guides very shortly, which give a lot more information and go through that in a bit more detail. Finally here, you can see a format that you would use to reference journal articles and an example below. Again, there's a slight difference between the format at the top and the example. At the top, you can see a DOI, no DOI below that. That's because sometimes journal articles don't have DOIs. Occasionally you might come across one, maybe if you've accessed a printed one, or occasionally someone online that don't have a DOI. If you can't see that, you can miss it out, and just include all of the other details. So just before I show you how to access referencing guidance through LibGuides, I've just got some hints and tips and sort of answers to common questions that we get asked around referencing. So first of all, what do you do if you can't see a date of publication? In lieu of that, you can use ND, so n.d. This will most commonly be the case with websites. So if you're accessing a website and you go to a page and you can't see when that was published or the date it was created, you can use ND instead. What if you can't find an edition, or you don't know what edition a book is? If that's the case, leave it blank, or leave it out. And that's the same if you come across a book that's a first edition as well. You just miss the edition out of your referencing completely. If it's a second or subsequent edition, include it. If it's a first, don't. What if you can't find an author? I think I've just touched on this a little bit, but if there's no personal author or named author, use a corporate author instead. Again, this is sort of fairly common with websites. If you're using a book or a journal article, you won't come across this. There'll always be a named author. But if you're using a website, you might not know who's written the page. In that case, use the company name instead, or the corporate author. So an example would be Coventry University or the NHS, or maybe you've come across something from the Department of Education and you don't know who's written it. There's no personal author. In that case, you would use Department of Education as your author. Some questions around multiple authors and some tips around what to do with more than one author. If there's one or two authors, list all of the authors in both the in-text citation and in the list of references. If you've got 3 or more authors in a source, in your in-text citation, you can use et al. So an example would be Torrington et al. There. Et al. Just means and others. So you list your first author, then et al., and then continue your referencing as normal. But in your list of references at the end of your work, you need to list all of the authors. So if you've got 3 or more authors, use et al. In your in-text citation, but not in your list of references at the end. If you are quoting, use the exact words used in the original source. Use quotation marks as well. In APA7, these are single quotation marks, and you can see an example on the slide here. And do include the author and page number as normal. If you are paraphrasing or summarising, so putting something into your own words, you still need to reference. And it's important to maintain the meaning of the original source, so don't misconstrue a source. Maintain the original meaning and reference as normal. So that's the end of our slides. Before I recap what we've covered today and give you some contact details and some details around support, I'm just going to very quickly go back onto our LibGuides pages and just demonstrate how to find lots of referencing guidance following this session via the library and via LibGuides. As you can see, I've gone back over to our LibGuides pages. From LibGuides, if you need referencing help or support, you can just click on the referencing option here or here. So select that, and you can see it will take you through to an APA referencing guide. This guide contains all the information you'll need on how to reference lots of different source types or sources you might come across. If you want a basic introduction to referencing, I would suggest having a look at these videos. And you can see we've got 3 videos. This one covers how to reference, what referencing is. This second video covers in-text citations, and the third one, how to construct a list of references. If you want a basic introduction to referencing and a really nice, clear, simple guide in APA7, click on this quick guide on the right here. And this looks a bit like this. I'll just go to the start. So this is the quick guide. And using this quick guide, you can click on different sources. So I'll show you a journal article. It will show you an example of an in-text citation, a non-integral one, an example of an entry in a list of references, and you can see the different components labelled there. And it also gives you a checklist of all of the bits that you need to include in your reference as well. So if you work through that checklist and include all of those details, you really can't go too far wrong. And you can see throughout this guide, we've done that for all of the other sources that you might come across. So web pages, if we go back to the contents, we've got books. And there's also an example piece of writing with a list of references at the end as well. So if you want to see an example of some in-text citations and a reference list, that's available too. Just going back to our LibGuide, we've also got some more detailed guidance in these tabs. So if you want to explore a bit more or go look at guidance that goes beyond the quick guide, you can click on these tabs, click the type of source you're referencing, and then you've got lots of guidance within these tabs as well for all of the sources of information that you might come across. So that's just a quick tour of our referencing LibGuides page. Just to finish this session off, I'm going to just go very briefly back to our PowerPoint and just give you a quick recap of what we've done today and direct you to some further help and support. To recap what we've covered in this session then, we've looked at understanding why we need to reference, when to include in-text citations and how to construct those, and how to create a list of references and how to construct those references too. Finally, we looked at some further hints and tips, some guidance, and the guidance on LibGuides too. So if following this session, you need to arrange support or you have any questions or you need more guidance, you can contact the library for one-to-one help and support, and our email address is just on the slide there. or you can use our LibGuides page, and via the LibGuides page you can access all of the referencing guidance we've looked at, and Locate and BibView, and lots of other helpful platforms too. So that's the end of this video. Hopefully that's been helpful, and thanks for watching.